This is my first coffee today. It's a Maxwell House. I mean, that's a pretty run in the mill. I like my voice went high pitched. It's a pretty run in the mill coffee brand, and I just wish I had more coffee. I want like espresso or something. I'll probably get it later after this whole thing. But welcome to the podcast. Today's June 18th. I'm learning as I do this podcast, I like to move my hands around. I think it's just so I feel busy. So my hands are moving all over the place right now. But today's my birthday. I don't know if it's not that actually, we'll play. Let me say it again. Today is my birthday. When I played that breakdown, I was hoping everyone would jump into like a dance circle of some sorts, and hopefully like put your hands up. I imagine everyone's wearing a different basic color, and everyone's just like, you can't see what I'm doing, but I'm doing like a little breakdown. I'm kicking my leg out, kicking it back in, and then I'm kind of signaling to the next person. We kind of made eye contact, but that was just the insinuation that I'm gonna send it off to them, and I'm gonna stop dancing. I'm just gonna kind of vibe at that point, and that's about it. But regardless of my hyperbolic and very hypothetical dance circle, it is my birthday. I don't really celebrate it that much anymore, just because it's like I never really did. I never really saw the need to, especially with I just don't like holidays in general. I like the feeling of holidays, like specifically Christmas. I just like the decorations and the setup, but actual Christmas kind of sucks. So I'm just gonna chill. I will say it is my fault today. I did this interview, I'd say a week before, and I definitely told myself several times to edit it before my birthday so I wouldn't have to edit it on my birthday. And I was like, oh, you can have the whole day to yourself, Terrance. You can hear that? Absolutely free. But I was like, nah, I can't do that. I need to edit day of, because that's how we roll. And that's just procrastination at its finest. Today's guest is, I sound a little nasally just because I just woke up. But today's guest is Daniel Hart. So this is a super crazy, super insane interview that I got to do just by the fact of like reaching out and seeing if he was interested. And he was, which was awesome. But in 2017, I believe, or 2018, I saw a trailer for a movie called A Ghost Story by David Lowery. Stars like Casey Affleck, Rooney Mara, but like regardless, I remember watching the trailer and like I was so mystified by the fact of like, not by the fact, but by the music. So there's a song played and it was by a band called Dark Rooms, and it was called I Get Overwhelmed, and it was like a perfect nice little mix of like orchestral music with like alternative music, and it was really cool. And then I looked into the band, and then I saw Daniel Hart was the lead for the band, and as well as being the composer, he did a whole bunch of other stuff for the movie, or at least not other stuff, more or less other work. And it was just incredible to see all of his work, and just get a chance to talk to him. It was really cool. I'm super grateful. You definitely hear me fanboying out throughout the whole exchange, maybe one, two, maybe three times. But it was just cool to see. I mean, it was just one of those unreal moments where you're talking to someone I listen to that song probably once a week. I mean, I Get Overwhelmed is insane. And then, I mean, his other music's incredible. And then we kind of talk about like film score composition a little bit and just a bunch of other things. But overall, it was a pretty good interview, I felt, in my own honest opinion. And I'm forever thankful for Daniel giving me the chance to do it. And he also wanted me to plug. So during the time we recorded, it was maybe a week or so after the main protests, after the killing of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement regaining its steam. So he wanted me to plug www.defund12.org. It is a organizational or I will say it's an organizational template. I checked out the website. So basically, it has pre-templated emails that you can send to local advisors regarding defunding the police stations, the killing of George Floyd. I mean, it's already made for you. You just have to put in certain information. And it's a really cool resource. So visit www.defund12.org. I also want to thank Anchor for giving me money during this quarantine time. I mean, it's just advertisements and it's people watching, but more or less, thank you, Anchor, and then thank everyone for listening. I'm going to keep it short and sweet today so I can go do whatever I want. And usually, doing whatever I want involves watching a Nova documentary and then eating powdered donuts that I regretted buying. Oh, I didn't even mention the biggest thing this week. I've decided to go vegetarian. It was Jesus. How did I just swipe past this one? I'm choosing to change my diet because I've always had a horrible diet, and that involves junk food. I mean, powdered donuts, as I was about to bring up, but I am changing it to. I'm going more. I want a plant based diet. I had some chicken the other day, and I just kept thinking. It was a weird moment where it was just like, man, this could be like the chicken. Like this is his chest. I don't know. I just had a weird feeling about eating it. So I was like, okay, let's convert over. So I'll keep you updated on that. Next week, I'm going to be trying a new game show style type episode. I don't know how it's going to work yet. I think this whole week is going to be figuring out how it's going to be. It's going to be like a trivia type episode. I kind of want to do something like that every 10 episodes. And it should be super fun. But other than that, I mean, I'm vegetarian. It's been 2 days. I've been eating meat. It's not like I eat a lot anyways. But moving back into the show, this is Daniel Hart. This is me. This is me being kind of embarrassing, but I'll keep it in for the sake of the show. It's a pretty good interview, so I thank you guys for listening. It's crazy. Episode 9. Insane. Episode 10 is going to be coming up. And then guess what happens after that? Episode 11. Okay, but that's just the cue for me to let me know that I have nothing else to say. So, without a doubt, I mean, there's no doubts anyways. Without any... what's the saying? Jesus Christ. Without any hesitation, I present to you the interview between me and composer, musician, all-around great guy, Daniel Hart. Thank you. Hey, how are we doing today? Excellent. I want to thank you so much for doing this, by the way. I really appreciate your time.
Of course.
Yeah, so I did want to first initially tell you, I first heard about your band through a ghost story, I think 3 years ago. So I remember seeing the trailer for with the song I Get Overwhelmed on it. And I remember that being the most striking thing visually I've seen in a while. So I've been meaning to tell you that. I just want to say.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.
I really like that trailer.
It was incredible.
Movie trailers these days because they're so bombastic. But
exactly. No, it was great. And so I think kind of looking back, I saw your music in that trailer, and then I kind of started looking back and I was like, oh, okay. Dark Rooms is pretty interesting. And then I looked into your discography and it was incredible. It was such a nice, incredible mix of like orchestral work with a little bit of funk. And it just made me super curious about your whole musical background. And that's kind of why I emailed you, and I wanted to see your kind of story, you know?
Sure. My parents are both classical musicians. And I started playing the violin when I was a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I took classical violin lessons all the way up through high school. And then I got to the point where I was trying to figure out what I wanted to study
Hmm.
in college, and I didn't want to do classical music. Just didn't hold.
Yeah.
That whatever was interesting me at the time.
Hmm.
And I looked at, I got into jazz violin
Yeah.
towards the end of high school, and I was looking at jazz violin programs, but there weren't that many. I think there are probably more now.
Hmm. Imagine so. Yeah.
And my other real passion at the time was theater.
Hmm.
And so I decided to go for a theater program,
Okay.
first as an actor, and then when I realized that I wasn't that great of an actor, uh, as a playwright, because that was the other thing that really interested me.
Yeah.
So that's my degree from college. I got a degree in playwriting.
Hmm. And then what college was that, if you don't mind me asking?
It's called Southern Methodist University.
Oh, okay.
It's a private school in Dallas,
Hmm.
and my father was a professor there,
Oh, okay.
which meant it was super cheap, relatively speaking,
Yeah,
for me
that's
to go
probably
there.
the best movement. And then were you raised in Texas?
My family moved to Texas when I was 10 years old,
Okay.
so mostly, yep.
Okay.
We moved from Kansas. I was born in Kansas,
Oh, okay.
small town Kansas. That was the first 10 years of my life, and that's probably the place that resonates with me the most in terms of where I'm actually from, like the kind of the
Hmm.
geographical identity that I can relate to the most.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And then you said you had a little bit of music kind of before that. So you were playing violin from the beginning?
I started violin when I was 3. I
Hmm.
don't even remember starting,
Really?
but me and my older brother, he's a couple years older than me, and he also took violin lessons when he was a kid.
Oh, okay.
So we would go to these violin lessons together, and he would have his lesson. I think when you're 5 and 3 years old, a lesson probably lasts about 10 minutes, 20 minutes,
Hmm.
something like that.
Okay.
Whatever the attention span of a little kid is.
I
So
imagine.
he would have his lesson, then I would have my lesson
Yeah.
with the same teacher.
Oh, that's crazy. And then, so I can imagine the sense of composition and the sense of music has just been throughout your whole life. Like it can almost seem like a roadmap, maybe that you didn't even know was there.
I didn't start composing anything until the like towards the end of high school,
Hmm.
and that was when I started playing guitar, and that's when I started writing songs.
Yeah.
And I didn't document anything at the time. I wasn't into recording
Hmm.
or engineering, so it's just me and a guitar. And I never thought about writing songs any other way, and I never really thought about writing um, non-pop music
Yeah.
like classical music or
Yeah.
jazz or anything like that. Um, but when I was in college, my brother got married, and I wrote a string quartet, like a very short string quartet piece for his wedding,
Yeah.
and that's also some of the first composing I ever did.
Oh,
At
that's
least
cool.
that wasn't a song. And when I was in college, I started playing in bands. I
Yeah.
played in a bunch of bands, and one of those bands was called the Doubting Scholars,
Okay.
and it was created by a music professor at SMU,
Hmm.
and he treated the band like a class, like it was, because the rest of the band was made up of students,
Yeah.
and so everything that we were learning how to play was in some way furthering my musical education, and I
Hmm.
think the same was true for the other students in the band. And so
Yeah.
we would play blues, and we would play jazz standards,
Mhm.
and we would play um, Tom Waits and Oingo Boingo and we would play traditional Celtic music like reels and jigs
Yeah.
and Beach Boys.
And then did you find like yourself just more keen to music with that band, or did you see like maybe a profession at that time, or?
I really loved playing in bands. I did that for a long time. Like when I finished school, I I moved to North Carolina with some friends of mine from college, and we started a record label,
Oh
and we
wow,
played in
okay.
each other's bands, and we toured up and down the East Coast for several years, trying to do that full time.
Mm-hmm.
And none of those bands really amounted to much.
Yeah.
And then people started getting married and going to grad school and doing other things that took up too much time for them to devote
Into
as
music
much time as we
completely.
had been devoting to our record label and our bands and
Yeah.
touring. It was around that same time that I started touring with other people's bands as a gun for hire.
Mm-hmm.
So I started playing in St. Vincent
Oh, okay.
and the Polyphonic Spree, which was a symphonic pop band from the early to mid 2000s.
Yeah.
And I was touring with a guy named John Vanderslice, who's based in, well, I guess he's based in LA now, but at the time he was based in San Francisco.
Yeah.
He's a songwriter.
Okay.
And I did that for several years, and that's all I really wanted to do
Mm-hmm.
was play in bands. And I had my own band too, and we would that I wrote songs for, and I was the front man for, and we would tour around the U.S. And that's all that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But after the Great Recession, um, the economic crisis of the 2008,
Yeah.
I feel like several of those job opportunities just kind of just started disappearing. And
Mm-hmm.
by the like end of 2011, 2012,
Yeah.
there just wasn't as much touring work being offered to me or coming my way.
Yeah.
And so um, I started to think about what else I could do
Mm-hmm.
professionally.
Yeah.
Um, and a friend of mine, um, what a great service he did to me. He
Yeah.
worked at a jingle house, a commercial jingle house in
Oh,
Dallas,
okay.
like a place that writes music for commercials.
Yeah.
And he just started throwing work my way. I really needed the money, and it turned out that I was not bad at it.
Mm-hmm.
And like one of the first things that I wrote was used for a commercial, and then I wasn't worried about rent for a couple months.
Yeah.
And so I started doing more of that, and that that was all in Dallas. Like I was living in Dallas.
Yeah. So that was all in Texas.
Yeah, so I had moved away after school, and I moved to North Carolina. I was there for several years running this record label with my friends, and then I moved out
Yeah.
to LA for a couple of years.
Okay.
And I was kind of broke, so I moved back to Dallas to
Okay.
save money, and that's when I met David Lowery, who's a director and screenwriter, and at this time he was just making his first few films, and he asked me to write some music for those films, these tiny films that he was making.
Yeah.
And I'd never done anything like that before, and never thought about doing anything like that before.
Yeah.
But I liked him, and I liked the movies that he was making.
Mm-hmm.
So I gave it a shot, and it turned out that came fairly easily to me.
Mm-hmm.
I think because of the background that I had playing in this band in college that played all these different styles of music,
Yeah.
and therefore made me interested in all these different styles of music.
Mm-hmm.
And then also having this passion for the theater and having a degree in playwriting made me interested in things like plot and storylines and character development.
Yeah.
All the things essential to a good narrative screenplay. So it seemed like a good fit, even though I hadn't really thought about it before that point. And so then David and I started working together on films, and that was right around the time that that I started Dark Rooms.
Okay.
I was in Dallas, and I had disbanded my previous band, The Physics of Meaning.
Okay.
The one from North Carolina.
Yeah.
In 2008, and I made a solo record after that. That I was very pleased with at the time that I made it, but not long afterwards didn't really like it that much.
Yeah.
I feel like it was the direction that I wanted to go. Stylistically, it wasn't what I was interested in.
Okay, so you moved on from that point.
Within a year of releasing it.
Oh, okay.
It was a very straightforward indie pop record. And
then what year was that? I'm sorry.
I think it came out in 2010, but the stuff I was writing all that music in 2008 and 2009.
All right.
So yeah, I released a solo album and then decided that I needed to go in a different direction stylistically in terms of a band. So I formed a new band once I had moved to Dallas with my partner Rachel, who runs the business side of Dark Rooms.
Yeah.
And also plays in the band. And then a drummer that I had met in Dallas at a school where we taught kids how to play rock and roll.
Oh, that's so cool.
School of Rock, like the movie. Yeah.
Literally, quite literally.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a franchise that schools all over the country.
Oh, okay. That's hilarious.
And, we were both teaching at one of these School of Rocks, and I heard him playing drums in the room next door to me, and it was way more interesting than anything I'd heard in a long time. So I went over and we started chatting. We really hit it off. So then Bobak became the drummer for Dark Rooms.
Okay.
And then one of my old friends from North Carolina, who I'd been working with off and on various projects, Casey, became the guitar player for Dark Rooms.
Yes.
4 of us, and we released an album in 2013, our first album.
Which is incredible, by the way.
What's that?
I said it's incredible, by the way. I listened to your whole discography. I mean, it's crazy to also hear you speak about the fact that you kind of started film composition and Dark Rooms at the same time. It almost feels like you can thematically hear it in your music. And that's just coming from me. I kind of like it gave me a little bit of context per se on your music, which is awesome.
Yeah, it felt like a real shift for me in my own thinking about what kind of music I wanted to make and what kind of role music would play in my life. And it all happened around that same time.
Yeah.
And in terms of the band, in terms of Dark Rooms, I heard that. Do you know who J. Paul is?
No, unfortunately.
J. Paul is a British, a current British, like experimental R&B artist, and he released some music around that time. It was posted to Bandcamp, and then it was taken down, and it was supposedly his first album, but according to him, somebody had stolen his laptop and then posted it.
Oh, you know what? I think I know the aura, at least the legend of this, but I've never been familiar with the artist. But that was did you see that as an inspiration or just like?
Yeah, it was a huge inspiration. I'd never heard anything like it.
Yeah.
And it really informed that first Dark Rooms record, for sure.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'd gotten into more drum programming.
Yeah.
Since moving back to Dallas,
Mm-hmm.
and um, I was listening to J. Paul. I was listening to a lot of um, instrumental hip hop, '90s hip hop,
Oh, okay.
and um, and then a lot of film scores because I just started working on films.
Yeah.
So I was listening to film scores, like trying to learn from those film scores
Mm-hmm.
in order to write my own film scores. And I feel like that those are the ingredients that those are some of the main ingredients that went into that first Darkrooms record.
Mm-hmm. And it's just, did you guys performed? I imagine you have a circuit of some sorts of performing or touring.
We toured like 2 to 3 times a year from 2012 through 2018, and there were multiple. It was usually like 1 or 2 U.S. tours a year, and then one European tour.
Okay.
And so I think we've toured Europe 4 or 5 times now as Darkrooms, and then the U.S. probably 8 or 9 times,
Oh, okay.
something
Was
like
there,
that.
was there a moment while touring that resonated with you specifically? Like, was there a big, awesome moment that you had with the band at that time?
One of my favorite shows that we ever played was in London
Okay.
in 2017.
Yeah.
It was our first time ever playing London, and so I was apprehensive about the show because I'd played London a lot with other bands over the years,
Yeah.
and I found the UK in general to be very hit and miss
Really? Okay.
um, in terms of the number of people that come out, the kind of enthusiasm they'll have.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think, in my experience, British crowds are a little more reserved in their appreciation of
Okay. Yeah.
American crowds.
Yeah.
And I'd never played this club before that we were playing in London with Darkrooms.
Mm-hmm.
So all that to say, I wasn't sure what to expect. I wasn't expecting a lot, but we got on stage and I looked out and there were, I don't know, 200 something people in the audience, and it wasn't a huge club, so the room was basically full.
Yeah.
And then we started playing our songs, and people in the audience were singing along with our songs.
Mm-hmm.
I got very emotional. I almost cried on stage. It was really hard to make it through one of the songs. Maybe I get overwhelmed. Probably I get overwhelmed.
Yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
that's terrific. I mean, it was just a whole ball of nerves that turned into excitement. I mean, I imagine that must have been great.
Yeah, it was very moving. I love performing because of that audience performer connection.
Yeah.
There's this communal energy in the room. That's what's so special about it. It's this intangible magic
Yeah. No.
hovering in between these people. And um, that was just a room full of that, like nonstop feeling. And people were so enthusiastic. And um, after the show, we were down at our merch table selling
Yeah.
vinyl and t-shirts and CDs. And so many people came up to us just to say how meaningful the music was for them.
Yeah.
And a lot of people had discovered our music the same way that you did. Like a lot of people had
Mm-hmm.
seen a ghost story, and that's the reason that they knew about us, and that's the reason that they came to the show.
Yeah.
And I was really happy to know that happened, because it's often that way for a band. Like nobody will know who you are, and then your music ends up in a movie or a TV show or a commercial, and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden it changes. Now for us, it was on a fairly small scale. It's a fairly small movie.
Yeah.
It didn't change the trajectory of Darkrooms
Yeah.
overnight, but it certainly did um, create more of a following for us, and just give us so much more exposure than we had ever had up to that point.
Yeah, no, it's incredible in the sense of like I mean the scene where Rooney Mara is listening to your song is like probably one of the most captivating scenes. Well, because that whole movie basically revolves around, I'd say, the music more than anything, just because I mean he is a ghost, but but it, but it is it's so captivating. I mean, I was stuck in my chair the whole time I was watching it. It was just how that song went hand in hand with that movie was unbelievable. So like it's just I'm sorry to toot your horn there, but it was great.
The song was not written for the film.
Yeah.
It already existed, and I played it for David just right after we finished the first mix of it, basically, because I share all of my music with him, even if it's not for his films.
Yeah.
And I played it for him, and then a couple of days later, he asked me if he could have that song in the next film that he was working on. It was still just a script that he was writing at that point.
Yeah.
And I hadn't read the script, but I always say yes to David. So
that's awesome.
I said yes. And I didn't realize that he was planning for it to be to play as big a part as it ended up playing.
Yeah. No, it was incredible, 100%. I feel like it was a part of the film. I mean, that's what you kind of want as a composer, right? Is to have both things intertwined. As simple as that sounds.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
They should feel like one thing.
Exactly. And I did want to say, do you get the same feeling of you said you kind of get like gratitude and that excitement from a crowd? Do you kind of get the same thing when you're like scoring a film or composing for a film when you're watching it on the screen?
No, it's hardly ever like that.
That's incredible.
The work is so solitary.
Yeah.
And there's not usually a performance of it, unless it's like Lord of the Rings, where
the Hollywood Bowl
goes on tour and performs that music
for
crowds while the movie's playing, or it's like Game of Thrones, where Ramin Djawadi goes on tour and does the Game of Thrones themes with an orchestra.
Yeah,
it's not usually like that, and I've seen my movies in theaters with audiences, but it's not like after some music finishes playing in a scene, people start clapping because they like the music so much. It's just part of and I don't want that either. Like I'd rather the music go kind of unnoticed because it feels like it's just part of the whole experience.
Yeah.
Rather than being singled out or being more important than other things happening in the film.
And you said that you were a hired gun. So did you basically essentially play every single instrument, or did you specialize in one instrument during that time? Or
I played a lot of violin in people's bands.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay.
But I played a bunch of stuff. Yeah, I played guitar and bass and keys, a little bit of drums, but I'm not a very good drummer.
Did you learn anything significant during that time? Was that like a great experience or learning experience? Or
yeah, it was a huge learning experience. All of those instruments, because as a bass player, you have to be, in my opinion, totally in sync with the drummer.
Okay.
Because you're the rhythm section. You know, the bass is supposed to come from the kick drum.
Yeah.
Okay. I would say most of the bands that I played bass in follow that like traditional format of the relationship between drums and bass. But yeah, that's like I had to learn how to do that well. And playing guitar in a band, I think mostly I was playing rhythm guitar.
Okay.
You have to figure out how that fits on top of the bass and the drums. It's a supporting role, but without it, sometimes it's the music is just not as meaningful as it would be.
Yeah.
And then playing other people's songs in a band, well, especially with strings in a band, I'm often writing my own parts. So then it's this combination of composing with honoring someone else's composing.
Yeah. No, okay, I
Almost
understand.
like working on a film, because I'm writing music for a film, but my main goal is to support the director's vision,
Yeah.
and the director's storytelling. And
Oh,
so the
okay.
same thing, like playing strings in a band, I may be writing my own parts, but they have to go with all the other music that's happening at the time.
Yeah, they have to at least coincide, right? But no,
Yeah, and hopefully not stand out too much. Hopefully, again, feel like part of the whole, not like I'm out there showing off.
I get that. No, but it's just interesting in this sense because I created this podcast because I wanted to talk to creatives in different industries. I myself am a creative. I do illustration. That's mainly what I'm still going to school for. I'm an older student, but it's just cool to hear everybody's stories and seeing where everybody's coming from and how it led up to certain events that I see, at least in my own life, as significant. Like it's cool to actually speak to you and talk to you about what you at least learn a little bit about your thought process is the best way to put it. And yeah, once again, I want to thank you for doing this too, by the way.
Of course, my pleasure.
Yeah, but it's been great. And so with dark rooms and the movie scores, are you kind of what are you more leaning on right now?
Right now, a couple of the things that I would be working on, like a TV show and a film, are on hiatus because nothing's being filmed right now. And it's given me extra time to work on the next Darkrooms album, which
Oh, that's terrific.
I had been really desperately searching for
Oh, okay.
before the lockdown started. And so I am still working on one film, but my schedule is much freer than I thought it would be. And so I've taken that time to really buckle down and make a lot of progress on a third Darkrooms album.
Oh, okay. And that's interesting in the sense. How do you feel about the culture of music now with the post lockdown and post coronavirus? Do you feel it changing a little bit or us going back to the same?
I don't know. I have a hard time envisioning a bunch of people packed into a club and
Yeah.
feel safe, at least for a couple years. And that sounds like a death knell to the live music industry.
Yeah.
At the same time, I see tons of friends post stuff on social media about ways that they have creatively worked around the limitations of a lockdown
Mm-hmm.
in terms of performance and recording,
Yeah.
bands and film scores.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm sure that there will be creative solutions to make it possible for people to enjoy live music again. I just have a hard time seeing it being exactly like it was before. And
Mm-hmm.
I think especially big music festivals where you're drawing all these people and
Mm-hmm.
they're all standing so close together will have a really hard time selling that model to audiences.
Yeah,
At least
at least for the next couple of years. I
short
mean,
term. Yeah, or if they're not having a hard time selling that model, then I personally would be wary of the people who are just willing to go and be that close to each other. Like I wouldn't want to be around those people.
yeah, that's pretty stress inducing, I can imagine.
Yeah.
But it's a crazy thing to see. I mean, in this time, I feel like the keys are like the human adaptability to this whole situation. I feel like you said, people are adapting. And it's interesting to see how so we're adapting. Like, I think it's crazy. Everyone automatically knows how to use Zoom now. And it's only been 2 months. And it's like, it's a extremely resourceful tool at this point. So it's just cool to see that. And I imagine that the music industry would do the same thing. And I kind of am praying on it too, because I'm a huge fan of music.
Yeah, we'll see. I think regardless of what happens to the music industry going forward, some of the most heartening things that I see right now are things like Sony Music pledging $100 million to programs related to Black Lives Matter and racial justice.
Oh yes, without a doubt. It's
That's a
incredible.
lot of money. That's a lot of money. And I hope that they follow through on that commitment and then are able to give that money to people who can make good use of it.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's been an interesting time, and at least it's a very historical time. I would say there's just so much caked on, and I mean, with especially the Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, that's been around since the beginning of time, but I guess it's just now relevant, and it's making its appearance during, I guess, this whole coronavirus pandemic, which creates this big. I don't know. It's just an interesting time. I didn't play my last episode of this podcast just because I felt that other voices needed to be heard, not mine. So it's just a interesting experience, and I believe your episode is going to come out a couple weeks after. But I just want to add, I hope that it's still being talked about at that point. You know?
It will still be talked about.
Yeah, yeah.
That's my guarantee.
Yes, I was scared with those little the black lives, or just the black little square on Instagram. You know, what was it, that little, there's a social media movement with the little black square that was blacking out all the resourceful information. Whether that was the goal or not, it was still pretty stressful.
Yeah, it's too bad that Blackout Tuesday didn't go as planned. And I've read some stuff about it since then. People objecting to it. There were people who were doing it using Black Lives Matter hashtags on their Blackout Tuesday posts, which
Hmm.
was yes, messing up feeds of people trying to get useful information. But even
Right.
for people like me who just posted a black square and didn't post any hashtags, I wonder what good it did.
Yeah.
I don't know that it did any, and uh, yeah, the criticisms that I read of it seemed very valid. So then, the question is, well, maybe for the people who did that and participated in that, maybe that can be a stepping stone to taking some other action related to racial justice that will be more productive.
Yeah, that's such an excellent way to put it. I mean, I'd say I agree completely, in the sense of, I didn't know if people were doing it for malice, or it's either way, it's getting information out there, which is incredible.
I hope it gets information out.
Hmm.
It gets more information out.
Yeah, but it's great. And sorry for segueing into the Black Lives Matter. I don't know how comfortable.
You don't
Yeah.
have to be sad. We can talk about Black Lives Matter all day. We just erase the episode that we did and let's talk about Black Lives Matter.
Oh, I'd love to. Are you kidding me? But it's perfect. No, but it's great to hear everybody's support for it. I mean, that's the biggest thing. I mean, I'm a person of color. I'm a black and Mexican, so it's an interesting take on this whole thing. I guess I could say, getting two different opposing values in general about this, and it feels like a middle ground, you know.
Hmm.
But
I wish that the Black Lives Matter movement was more um, supported and appreciated by white people in general.
yeah,
It's not. Most of the people that I interact with on social media are very much in favor of Black Lives Matter as an organization and the actions that they take.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have to go very far on social media to find lots of people who aren't in support of it at all.
Yeah.
And most of those people are white people.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of work to be done to not only reach racial equality, but racial equity.
Mm-hmm.
And I see some of that work being done now. That's very encouraging.
It's been very quick. I mean, that's the best way to put it. Not as quick as I'd want it to be, but there's definitely been some great actions in result of this whole thing.
There have been.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like, to me, it feels like the myth of an overnight success.
Overnight.
400 years of not much action leading to fireworks now. I'll take the fireworks.
Yeah. I mean, you have to, it's safe to assume something's wrong, right? Like something's wrong when every single state is protesting. That's just my 2 cents on the whole thing.
Absolutely. I'm happy to see it.
Yeah. It's perfect. And then I did want to ask about composing. So would you mind talking about the whole process behind composing? Just like a little Cliff's note. So like, how does that go? If you are making a composition for a film, what is the whole process like?
Usually I'll be talking to a director or producers of the film or both before they hire me, and they'll tell me what the film is about, or they'll send me a script, or depending on how far along the film is, they'll send me an edit of the film or an edit of a scene that's close to what they want it to be. And then I'll read that, or I'll watch that, or after our conversation, we'll figure out if it's like a good match. Usually when I'm talking to someone, it's because they sought me out because they heard something else that I did and they liked it.
Mm-hmm.
They want something like that for their own film.
Yeah.
And so we'll have discussions about style, what kind of style they're looking for. Because I'll have, if I watch a scene from a film or a TV show without any music in it, the scene itself will tell me what kind of music it wants to have. And I'll be starting to form ideas in my head. Like if I watch something, musical ideas start popping up into my head.
Oh, okay.
The kind of music that I think should go underneath what I'm watching.
Yeah.
But again, my job is just to help tell someone else's story when I'm working on films or TV shows. So what I want to know, usually from the director, is what they want musically to happen and the styles of music that they have in mind. And once we've had that discussion and they can tell me what they're looking for and I can tell them what I'm hearing, we usually find some kind of common ground.
Yeah.
There. Sometimes it's the same thing. Sometimes we both want to do the same thing, or sometimes they're completely open to whatever my ideas are, and then I'll just do that, and then they can tell me afterwards if they like it or don't, and then we'll go from there.
Okay.
But some combination of that, and so then they'll give me a scene or they'll give me an early cut of the film, and then I just start working and I start writing music as I'm watching the film, go scene by scene, and once I have like 10 minutes of the film scored, I will send it to the director and get feedback from them on what they like and what they don't, what's working, what isn't. And during that time, I'm trying to develop themes. I think most of the music that I've written for films and TV is based around themes and motifs.
Oh, okay.
Like most music for media is. Not all, but most of it's based around some kind of melody, some kind of theme.
Okay. And do you
I'll be working on those themes when I'm working on the first chunk of music for the film, and then the director will tell me what they like and what they don't, and we'll see if some of those themes that I had in mind are working, and we'll talk about instrumentation, and then I'll
Okay.
make decisions based on what they like and what they don't, and try and create more stuff for subsequent scenes based on
Yeah.
the feedback they've given me about what's working and what isn't.
Yeah. See, it's interesting to hear about the bureaucracy of all of the composing. It feels like, I mean, in one's head, at least in my own head, I imagine composing was just somebody sitting down. And excuse my ignorance, I just imagine somebody would like just play it out and we'll see. But it's interesting to see the planning that goes into it, which I always love. I just never knew the steps for it.
It's different for different composers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when film music started, like the music for Psycho,
Okay. Yeah.
or the music for any number of Hitchcock films
Mm-hmm.
from the earlier days of filmmaking. Um, there were no computers, right? And so there was no, I couldn't score a section of the film and then send it to the director and then they would give me feedback. There was nothing like that.
Yeah.
Maybe I could play some of my ideas on the piano,
Mm-hmm.
and then the director would tell me what they think about that. But the director wouldn't actually hear much of anything until I was on the stage with the orchestra recording everything.
Wow.
So it's very different from that now. But there are there's a Hans Zimmer. Do you know who Hans Zimmer?
Oh yeah, love Hans Zimmer.
Hans Zimmer's usual um, way of working, last I heard,
Mm-hmm.
is to watch the film all the way through and then to write one long piece of music,
Really?
not to the film. Just after watching it, he'll write one long piece of music based on the influences and whatever's in his mind after having watched the film. And then his team of people will take that long piece of music and break it down, split it up, reorganize it, figure out which themes work for which scenes,
Yeah.
and then come in and say yes, no, yes, no. But he's just writing like a suite,
Oh, geez. Okay.
and then the music gets broken up and
Yeah.
applied to specific scenes in the movie later on.
Yeah, he's insane. I saw his Coachella performance. I thought that was one of the most memorable I've ever seen.
Yeah, you enjoyed it?
Yeah, it was intense. But I did want to ask too, do you take, now you said the themes and motifs, do you take that into writing for Dark Rooms? Do you like to write about themes? Do you like to write about your personal life? Or maybe a little mix of both?
Um, there's a big difference composing for a film versus writing music for dark rooms,
Mm-hmm.
because it's nobody else's vision, it's just mine.
Yeah.
I could say or do whatever I wanted, really,
Yeah.
not beholden to anybody else.
Yeah.
But I try to create something that feels like an album is um, all going from it all has something in common, like it's a larger body of work.
Okay.
And so I try to do that stylistically, sometimes with more success than others, because my stylistic affinities are fairly varied, and so there are lots of kinds of music that I'm interested in exploring.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think that means that the music that I'm putting out on an album doesn't feel like it's all aesthetically one
Yeah.
statement, but that is always my goal anyway. And so I try to create a vision within that sense, with all the songs on the album feeling like they belong together,
Yeah.
stylistically. And then I'm also trying to follow that in terms of the lyrical content as well. And yes, most of my lyrical content is in some way or another autobiographical,
Oh, okay.
because I'm me, and
No one can be you. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know other people's brains. I just know my own.
No, it's,
So
I always feel like
other people, it's like other people through my perspective.
oh, okay. No, I always feel like I felt the passion in your voice with most of your songs. It's really interesting. Like you don't, I tend to not hear that a lot with new music. I feel like you carry, I don't know how to describe it properly, but you just, I feel the passion in those lyrics. And I think that's why I respected you from the beginning. I mean, and just how beautifully it coincided with the movie. But that was more of a catalyst or a gateway for me to discover your music, which is awesome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, and then I wanted to just to end it off right here because we're hitting the hour. I wanted to ask every single guest I ask, I always ask for a little piece of advice at the end just for my audience, like whether it be something you just learned, whether it's something in the creative industry or just something in general someone should take with them. So I wanted to ask you, do you have any general advice?
I think the best advice I've ever gotten was in an acting class when I was in college.
Mm-hmm.
And the acting teacher said to the class, acting is about figuring out what you want and then figuring out how to get it.
That's great.
And I thought it was excellent advice for acting, but also excellent advice for just about anything.
Mm-hmm.
So figuring out what you want, I think it's pretty tough.
Yeah.
But if you figure out one thing that you want, and then you can figure out how to get it, you're heading in the right direction.
Okay.
In terms of music, I think the best advice I've ever gotten for film music is write some music for a scene and then move it all later and see if it's better.
Okay.
So you watch the scene and then you write the music for the scene.
Yeah.
And then if you move everything later, does the music then become, instead of telling you what's happening, it becomes a reaction to what's happening?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Oftentimes, it's more meaningful when it's not necessarily trying to tell the exact beats of the story that's happening on screen, but instead is providing some kind of commentary as to what people are seeing on screen.
Oh, that's an interesting way to put it. That probably makes a lot more sense too.
That's also kind of the way that the brain works. Like if you watch a movie for the first time, you're not absorbing everything exactly at the moment that it happens on screen in front of you, right? Like you see it and then it goes into your eyes and then it goes into your brain and then you think about it. And then later on, some meaning can be attributed to it, but not in the very second that you're seeing it. I think it just follows the natural patterns of understanding and appreciating art.
Yeah, I feel like I've studied most things in art. I feel like I've kind of done the full encompassing. I tried to do music for a little bit. I realized I wasn't good at that. I tried to do some film work, but I realized I like more of the visual aspect of it compared to the actual details that went along with it and logistics. So then I kind of moved into art, and it's kind of crazy how you kind of talk about that commentary. It almost feels like conceptually it's all the same.
Mm. Yeah, I would hope that there are lessons that can translate from one artistic medium to another.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all just forms of creative expression.
Yeah.
some of those forms speak to people more than others because of who they are. And some people are better at expressing themselves through one form than another because of who they are or their training or their talent.
Yeah.
It's all still the expression.
Yeah. And that's great. I mean, those are the perfect set of advice to end it, let me tell you. And but that's essentially it. That is my show. Do you have anything to plug or anything that you're doing particularly right now that you want to tell people about?
I'm in projects that are not near any kind of release. If I'm going to plug anything, just plugging the Black Lives Matter movement. So let's plug that. Black Lives Matter. And defund the police. I think we can plug that.
That's perfect.
Defund12.org. The number's 12. Defund12.org allows people to, in many cities and states, email people in government expressing their desire. It's like a template. You can just fill it out and then it gets sent to everybody that you want to send it to. Super quick and easy way to let your voice be heard if you are an advocate of defunding the police.
That's perfect. I'll put a link on the bottom for that. 100%. I love that.
Defund12.org.
Okay, perfect. And then once again, I want to thank you for doing this. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate this. This is great. And
My pleasure. Great to talk to you.
Yeah, it was great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, take care.
That is the absolute end of this show. Thank you for listening to episode 9. If you are still listening, that is incredible. I want to thank Daniel Hart again. And then remember to go to is that 2 W's? It's 3. www.defund12.org. It is a already made template for you to email local advisors in your community about defunding the police or police brutality. Thank you and have a great night or day. You know, we're all a family here. I'll see you later.